My stepmom demanded rent while I was in high school, then I revealed the house was mine. Can you imagine having your entire world slowly chipped away, piece by agonizing piece, by the very people who were supposed to become your new family? And then, the ultimate betrayal, watching your own father choose them over you, simply to keep them happy? It's a wound that goes bone deep, a kind of heartbreak I never thought I'd survive. My whole life, it was just me and my dad. My mom, she'd passed away when I was 4, and her absence carved out a void so deep it felt like it swallowed all the light in our house. Dad, bless his heart, he tried. He really did. He kept things steady, but I always saw the cracks, the way he'd stare at Mom's favorite armchair, or linger a little too long over an old photo album, a ghost of a smile on his lips. Our house wasn't just ours, it belonged to my grandparents, and after they passed, it became a quiet sanctuary for 2 grieving souls. It still had that lived-in charm, the creaking wooden floors, floral wallpaper faded with time, and a faint, comforting smell of lavender that never seemed to leave. Then, when I turned 14, everything changed. One evening, Dad came home, a nervous energy clinging to him. He adjusted his tie, a telltale sign he was hiding something, and cleared his throat. "Leah," he began, his voice hesitant, "I want you to meet someone special." The way he said it, my stomach instantly twisted into knots. Before I could even ask what he meant, the front door creaked open, and in walked Sandra. Tall, blonde, perfectly put together, radiating a confidence that seemed to suck all the air out of the room. Her perfume was strong, too strong, clinging to the air like a challenge. But I'd barely registered her. My attention was immediately drawn to the 2 figures lurking behind her. "These are my kids," Sandra announced, her voice warm, almost saccharine, yet with a sharp edge, like she was trying too hard. She gestured with manicured nails. "This is Caleb, he's in college, and this is Kelsey, she's 16. Caleb barely even looked up, glued to his phone as if the fate of the world depended on whatever was on his screen. "Kelsey, though?" She stared me down, a slow, condescending smirk spreading across her face. It wasn't friendly. It was a warning. Later that evening, while Dad and Sandra were lost in conversation, Kelsey cornered me in the kitchen. "Just because our parents are dating doesn't mean we're sisters," she sneered, crossing her arms and leaning against the counter. Her tone dripped with superiority. "We don't have to be friends either. Let's just keep our distance, okay?" I was too stunned, too bewildered, to even respond. 6 months later, Dad and Sandra were married. And just like that, everything familiar about our house, it vanished. Caleb took the guest room. Kelsey, with her endless TikTok dances, moved into the study. And Sandra's things? They multiplied like weeds. My mom's cherished photos, her little trinkets, they were all boxed up, replaced with Sandra's sterile vases, generic candles, and framed photos of her kids. The bathroom, once a shared, easy space for Dad and me, became a war zone. It was either occupied by Sandra's endless beauty routine or Kelsey's constant social media marathons. I started waking up an hour earlier just to shower before school. But I didn't complain. How could I? Dad was happy. For the first time in years, he hummed while making breakfast, came home early for family dinners, and smiled in a way I hadn't seen since Mom died. Then came the promotion. Regional Sales Director. Dad announced at dinner, beaming from ear to ear. Sandra's eyes gleamed. "Oh, David, that's amazing. We should renovate the kitchen. Maybe get a new car." I barely heard her. My focus was on one terrifying phrase, extensive travel. The reality of those words hit me like a punch to the gut a week later, when Dad left on his first business trip. The second his car disappeared down the street, Sandra's warm smile evaporated, replaced by a steely glare. "Leah," she said, her voice sharp and cold, "we need to set some ground rules." Her version of rules quickly morphed into a never-ending list of chores and restrictions. No study groups, she'd declare. No volleyball practice. Someone needs to help with dinner, she'd say flatly, every single day. I rushed home from school, scrubbing floors, cleaning windows, and cooking, while Kelsey sprawled on the couch, giggling at her phone. Caleb? He was barely around, only showing up long enough to leave dirty dishes in the sink. One night, scrubbing pots in the sink, I just couldn't take it anymore. Why doesn't Kelsey do any of this? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Sandra's head snapped up from her magazine, her eyes narrowed dangerously. Kelsey is focusing on college applications, she snapped. She doesn't have time for chores. I glanced over at Kelsey, mid-TikTok dance, twirling with exaggerated enthusiasm. Really, I muttered, she looks so busy. Sandra's voice dropped, cold and sharp enough to cut glass. Leah, I won't tolerate disrespect. I clenched my jaw, biting back the torrent of words threatening to spill out. What was the point of arguing? Dad was gone, and Sandra ruled the house like a queen. The worst part wasn't the chores, or Kelsey's blatant laziness. It was the sickening act Sandra put on whenever Dad called. Oh, honey, she'd sigh dramatically, you have no idea how hard it's been, managing the house, taking care of everything on my own. And Dad? He'd fall for it every single time, clueless. He'd kiss her forehead, hand over gifts, designer handbags, expensive perfume, jewelry. You're amazing, he'd tell her. I don't know what we'd do without you. I'd stand there, silent, my hands raw from scrubbing floors, my homework untouched, watching the charade unfold. Every time I caught Kelsey smirking at me behind her phone, I realized the same painful truth: no one was going to save me. No one even saw me. Caleb was glued to his games, Kelsey to her phone, and I did all the work. Dishes, laundry, mopping, the list was endless. It didn't matter if I had exams coming up or if I was exhausted after school. I had to be the one to keep the house running because, according to Sandra, someone had to step up. One night, after Sandra had gone to bed, something inside me just snapped. I found Kelsey sprawled across the couch, earbuds in, scrolling through her phone with that same infuriating, lazy smile. My blood boiled just looking at her. Why don't you ever help? I asked, my voice tight with suppressed fury. She looked up at me with that smirk, as if she'd been waiting for me to finally break. Because no one notices you, she said simply. Dad only sees Sandra. You're invisible, Leah. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Her words hit harder than they should have. The worst part? She was right. By my senior year, I couldn't take it anymore. The resentment festered inside me like a wound that refused to heal. Then one evening at dinner, Sandra folded her hands neatly on the table and smiled that fake, practiced smile that always meant she was about to deliver a cruel blow. Now that you're 18, she said sweetly, you need to pay rent. $500 a month. I nearly choked on my food. I'm still in high school. I spluttered. She shrugged, completely unfazed. We can't afford freeloaders. Caleb and Kelsey both snickered, like this was some hilarious joke at my expense. I clenched my fists under the table. So Caleb, who plays video games all day, doesn't pay. Kelsey, who does nothing, doesn't pay. But I do? Sandra's smile didn't waver. My kids are getting established. A strange calm settled over me then, a cold kind of clarity I hadn't felt before. Well, I said, my voice eerily steady, I won't be paying rent. Sandra's expression hardened. Oh, you will. This is my house, my rules. I met her gaze, unwavering. No, I corrected, it's my house. Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. Sandra blinked, then let out a short, disbelieving laugh. That's ridiculous. I didn't flinch. My grandparents left it to me before they passed. It's legally mine. Sandra's face twitched, but she recovered quickly, pulling out her phone. We'll see about that. She pressed Dad's number and put him on speaker. The line rang twice before he picked up, his voice groggy. Sandra? What's going on? Sandra's voice turned sharp. Leah's claiming the house is hers. That's not true, right? A long pause. The kind that stretched too long, filled with something that felt like guilt. Then, Dad sighed heavily. Actually, it's true. The blood drained from Sandra's face. What? She shrieked, gripping the phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. Caleb and Kelsey sat frozen, their expressions a mix of confusion and shock. Sandra hung up abruptly, slamming the phone onto the table so hard I thought it might crack. She turned to me, her eyes dark. "Well," she said, forcing a tight smile, "that was a misunderstanding. You don't need to pay rent, Leah." I didn't respond. I just stared at her, unblinking, letting the weight of the truth settle in the air. She wasn't giving up that easily. I could see it in the way her fingers twitched, in the way her jaw clenched. That night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, knowing this wasn't over. And sure enough, through the paper-thin walls, I heard Sandra whispering to Dad on the phone. "David, you need to do something. She can't stay here." My stomach clenched. "Sandra, it's her house." Sandra's voice dropped to a low, syrupy tone, the same one she used when she wanted something. "I know, honey, but she doesn't belong here anymore. She's becoming a problem." My fists tightened around the sheets. Dad exhaled loudly. "What do you want me to do?" "Convince her to go away for college," Sandra said smoothly. "Out of state. Get her out of the house. She's 18 now, it's time for her to move on." There was a pause. Then Dad muttered, "Maybe you're right." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. They wanted me gone. My own father wanted me gone. The next morning, Sandra acted as if nothing had happened. She poured herself coffee, chatted with Caleb and Kelsey, all smiles. But I knew better now. She wasn't going to stop until she pushed me out of my own home. But she underestimated me. I had a plan. And I was going to win. I set my fork down with deliberate slowness. "Starting next month," I announced, my voice calm but firm, "everyone pays rent. $500 each." Sandra froze, mid-bite. Caleb, half awake, dropped his phone into his cereal with a splash. Kelsey's spoon clattered against the table. "Excuse me?" Sandra's voice was sharp, her smile now completely gone. I smiled back, sweet and unapologetic. "We're all adults, right? Seems fair." Sandra's face darkened. "Family doesn't charge family rent." I raised an eyebrow. "Funny, you said the opposite yesterday." She slammed her coffee cup down so hard the liquid spilled onto the table. "That was different. I was teaching you responsibility." I let out a dry, bitter laugh. That's rich, coming from someone living rent-free in my house. Caleb, ever the golden boy, shot up from his seat, knocking over his chair in the process. "Listen here." "No, you listen," I cut him off, standing up as well. "You've been out of college for 2 years and still don't have a job. I've been buying groceries with my own money. Maybe it's time you learned responsibility." I turned to Kelsey, who was still sitting there, frozen. "When was the last time you even did your own laundry?" Sandra's voice shook with pure rage. "You're just a bitter little girl, jealous of my kids." I met her glare with a steel in my eyes. "No, Sandra. I'm finally standing up for myself." Her chair screeched as she shot up from the table. "Caleb. Kelsey. Pack your things. We're leaving." They didn't hesitate. For once, they had no words, no sarcastic comments, no smug glances. An hour later, I stood in the doorway, watching as they stormed out, suitcases in hand. Sandra's face was twisted in fury, but beneath it, I saw something else, shock. She hadn't expected this. Neither had I, not really. The house felt peaceful for the first time in years. I could breathe. I walked through the now quiet rooms, my fingers trailing along the furniture, no longer feeling like a stranger in my own home. The peace didn't last. As the sun began to set, my phone buzzed. I hesitated, then answered. "What the hell did you do?" His voice was cold, angrier than I had ever heard it. "Sandra said you kicked them out. How could you be so cruel?" A bitter laugh escaped me. "Cruel? That's rich coming from someone who was planning to push me out of my own home." Silence. Then a week. "What are you talking about?" Don't lie to me, Dad. I heard you last night. I heard everything. Sandra told you to get rid of me, and you agreed. The line went dead silent. I could almost hear his thoughts racing. Then, a quiet, "It's not what you think." "It's exactly what I think," I snapped. "You chose her over me. You always do." Another long pause. Then his voice hardened. "You're tearing this family apart. Sandra is devastated. She's threatening to leave unless you apologize." Something inside me snapped. "Then let her leave." My voice was steadier than I expected. "I'm done. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine." I hung up before he could say another word. For the first time in years, I felt truly, completely free. Graduation came and went. Sandra, Dad, Caleb, and Kelsey never showed up. But my best friend's family? They took me in, hugged me tight, and celebrated me. They made me feel like I mattered, like I wasn't disposable. Days later, I sorted through my college acceptance letters. I'd gotten into several schools, but one stood out. Northwestern University. 1,000 miles away. It was time to go. I was packing for college when I saw Dad's car pull in. My stomach clenched, but I kept folding my clothes. The front door opened, and heavy footsteps echoed through the house. I turned to see them standing there, Dad, Sandra, Caleb, and Kelsey, all dressed like they were heading to a business meeting. Their expressions were cold, distant. "We've come to resolve this," Dad said stiffly, with Sandra nodding behind him. "I'm willing to forgive your behavior. We can move back in. But you need to apologize, and drop this rent nonsense." I looked at them. Sandra's smug smile. Caleb and Kelsey sneering. Years of being treated like a maid flashed through my mind. The nights spent scrubbing floors while they watched TV. The way Sandra would complain about how hard managing the house was while I did all the work. The way Dad had chosen them over me, time and time again. I straightened. "No." Dad's face hardened. "If you can't be part of this family, I'm done. I'm leaving, and I'm disowning you." I exhaled, my heart steady. "That's your choice, Dad. You've been choosing them over me for years. Why stop now?" Sandra gasped, hand on her chest like I had physically struck her. "You've always been jealous of my children." I felt a cold smile tug at my lips. "Jealous? No. But I finally see you all for who you really are. And I don't want any part of it." Dad's jaw clenched. "You'll regret this." "I won't." Sandra scoffed. "Come on, David. We're done here. Let's leave her to her pathetic little life." Caleb and Kelsey smirked as they turned to go. But I didn't care anymore. As the front door slammed behind them, the house felt lighter, emptier. But for the first time, that felt like a good thing. I stood there for a long moment, listening to the quiet. Then I picked up my suitcase and walked out the door, toward a future that didn't include them. It's been 3 months. I'm writing this from my dorm at Northwestern University, 1,000 miles away, finally free. The house, my house, is rented out to a young family. I visited once before I left for college, just to make sure everything was in order. The walls had fresh paint, the floors were polished, and the place no longer carried the weight of old memories. I could hear a child laughing from the backyard, and for the first time in years, the house felt like a home again. The rent covers my college expenses, so I don't have to worry about money. I have a scholarship too, but knowing I have financial security is a comfort I never thought I'd have. Dad? He's still working, living in a rented apartment. The last I heard, Sandra got her kitchen renovation, just not in my house. Caleb finally got a job, but still lives with Dad. And Kelsey? She dropped out of college to start a fashion blog. They've moved on, and so have I. Sometimes, late at night, I scroll through old photos. One always catches my eye, me and Dad on the front porch when I was 4, him holding me up so I could ring the doorbell. He was smiling then, a real, warm smile, the kind of smile that made me feel safe. I don't recognize that man anymore. Maybe one day he'll regret his choices. Maybe he'll see me as his daughter, not a burden. Maybe he'll realize that by choosing Sandra, he lost me forever. Or maybe he won't. Either way, I'm done waiting. Letting go isn't weakness, it's strength. And for the first time in my life, I'm finally strong enough to move forward. The past doesn't define me. I do.